The rotor wash whipped up choking clouds of dust, pelting grit against faces, rifles, and the armored skin of the waiting convoy. Men shouted over the roar, hands shielding eyes, ducking instinctively as the UH-60 Black Hawk screamed overhead before banking away toward the ridge. The heat shimmered over the tarmac, distorted by jet fuel and raw desert sun. "Damn thing sounds like the devil himself coughing up bullets," Sergeant Reyes muttered, spitting a dry wad of dust. Specialist Daniel Cortez grinned, adjusting his helmet strap. "Better than sitting in one of those rusted-up MRAPs when the road starts singing." The song, he meant, was the hollow, stomach-punch thump of an IED going off. Everyone in the platoon had learned that rhythm. Some had never gotten up again after hearing it. But this wasn't about the road or the Taliban or the endless desert stretching around them. This was about her. Lieutenant Emma Hayes. She stood at the edge of the flight line, arms crossed over her chest, boots planted like she owned the dirt. A slim figure in desert camo, chin raised against the sun, her gray flight helmet under one arm. Most of the guys had been laughing 5 minutes ago, because she'd said it. The phrase that made everyone turn their heads, the words that seemed like a punchline until they weren't. "I can fly it," she had said, steady as steel. The platoon had burst out in disbelief. Not because she was a woman, though a few grunts sure let their smirks linger too long, but because she wasn't a pilot. Not by training, not by assignment. Hayes was intel, attached to the unit as a field analyst. She spent her hours digging through intercepted chatter, cross-checking maps, and feeding the lieutenant colonel in Kabul with battlefield assessments. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the cockpit of a Black Hawk. But when the birds rolled in, one of them limping with a co-pilot down and the crew chief cursing a busted hydraulic system, Hayes had stepped forward like she'd been waiting for the chance. The laughter had lasted right up until she climbed inside. Now the air was choked with silence as the helicopter reappeared, banking smoothly over the camp, settling like a hawk folding its wings. Perfect descent, textbook flare, a gentle kiss of skids on the earth. No jarring thud, no panic in the controls. Hayes pulled off the helmet, tossing it back to the stunned crew chief before hopping out onto the tarmac like she'd just parked a sedan. "Still think I can't?" she asked, voice calm but with the faintest smirk. Nobody spoke. Later, around the fire barrels behind the motor pool, the talk started. "Who the hell does she think she is?" Reyes said, shaking his head. "One stunt doesn't make her a pilot." "She flew it cleaner than half the warrant officers I've ridden with," Cortez countered, pulling at the label of a water bottle like he wanted it to be a beer. "She had training. Must've. Maybe civilian side. Or maybe she's just crazy enough not to care if she crashes." The war had a way of turning gossip into legend faster than any stateside rumor mill. By the next morning, Hayes was the chick who stole a bird and landed it, and stories about her past were flying thicker than tracer rounds. Some swore she had a father who flew Apaches in Desert Storm. Others said she'd washed out of pilot school for punching an instructor. Hayes didn't feed the rumors. She just kept doing her job, running patrol debriefs, decoding enemy comms, marking supply routes. But she didn't have to speak for the story to grow. And that story followed her onto the convoy 2 days later, where the war reminded everyone that consequences were real. The Humvee was hot enough to cook in. Sweat pooled under body armor, soaked into undershirts, stung eyes as it dripped. Hayes sat in the back, headset on, laptop balanced on her knees. She wasn't supposed to be out here. Intel officers belonged in the FOB, but she'd insisted. "Information is only as good as the ground it's gathered from," she told Captain Lawson. "If I'm going to give you assessments, I need to see what the soldiers see." So she rode along, eyes flicking between the jagged line of mountains and the blinking signals on her screen. "Radio chatter spiking north of the ridge," she said into the intercom. "Might be nothing. Might be an ambush." Her voice was calm, professional. The driver, Private Darnell, wasn't so steady. His knuckles were pale on the wheel. "Feels like an ambush," he muttered. "Road's too quiet. Kids ain't even out throwing rocks." Cortez, manning the turret, scanned the horizon through mirrored shades. "Kid throws a rock at me today, I'll thank him for the warning." They rolled on. The explosion hit the second MRAP in line. A thunderclap of dirt and fire ripped the vehicle upward, flipping it like a toy. Metal shrieked as armor peeled open, smoke billowing black and acrid. Shouts filled the comms, half screams, half orders. "Contact left," someone yelled. Gunfire cracked from the ridge, rounds pinging off the convoy armor. Hayes's laptop slid across the seat as she grabbed her rifle, heart hammering. She wasn't supposed to fight. She wasn't trained like the infantry. But she wasn't going to sit frozen while men died either. "Reyes, cover fire." Cordes marked that ridge. Captain Lawson barked. Bullets snapped the air, dust spitting from the dirt wall beside them. Hayes fired blind over the door, barely seeing the target. The kick rattled her arms. Through the smoke, she spotted movement, the shimmer of heat off a launcher tube, the telltale glint before another rocket whooshed out toward the convoy. RPG. 10 o'clock, she screamed. Cortez swiveled, chain gun roaring. The explosion caught the shooter mid-run, sending him cartwheeling in a spray of dust. But the damage was done. The second MRAP was gutted, flames licking from the hatch. Screams came from inside. "Get those men out!" Lawson roared. The firefight became chaos. Soldiers dashed through gunfire, dragging bodies from the wreck. Hayes found herself running forward, adrenaline overriding fear, grabbing one arm of a wounded corporal as another soldier pulled the other. His legs were shredded, uniform soaked red. "Stay with me," Hayes yelled, voice raw, though she didn't even know his name. Mortar thumps echoed from the ridge. Shells whistled down, tearing craters into the road. The convoy was pinned, caught in the kill box. "Air support is 15 minutes out," Lawson barked over the radio. "We don't have 15 minutes. Then, through the smoke and the screaming, Hayes saw it. The crippled Black Hawk from 2 days ago, sitting patched up at the FOB. Its crew was gone, medevaced out. But it was fueled. It was waiting. She looked at Lawson. "I can fly it." The captain's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. "Not the time for hero speeches, Lieutenant. I'm not joking. We need air power now. That bird can lift and I can put it where it needs to be." Lawson hesitated only a fraction. A decision in war wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. And sometimes the only bad choice was not making one at all. He shoved her shoulder. "You've got 5 minutes? Don't come back without raining hell on that ridge." Hayes sprinted. The Black Hawk's cockpit smelled of oil and dust. Her fingers flew across the switches, memory and instinct colliding. It had been years since flight school, years since she'd touched controls. But the machine didn't care. She coaxed life into the engines, rotors thundering overhead. The bird shuddered, then steadied, straining against the earth like a beast eager to leap. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "We've got work to do." The convoy below was pinned, fire still flashing from the ridge. Hayes lifted off, nose dipping forward, the earth falling away beneath her boots. Over the radio, Lawson's voice cut through static. "If you're up there, Lieutenant, now would be a damn good time." She smiled grimly, fingers tight on the stick. "Roger that." Bringing the storm. She banked toward the ridge, chain guns opening, the Black Hawk screaming like fury itself. Dust, blood, and fire mingled below as the tide of battle shifted. And for the first time silence fell, not from disbelief, not from shock, but from the sudden, undeniable truth. Lieutenant Emma Hayes could fly. The Black Hawk thudded down hard, its skids gouging the dirt as dust whirled like a shroud. Lieutenant Emma Hayes's hands trembled on the cyclic, sweat dripping into her eyes. She kept her grip steady until the rotors spun into a low hum. Only then did she let herself exhale. Her pulse still hadn't slowed. The battlefield around her was a graveyard of smoke and blood. The ridge that had spat rockets only minutes ago was now silent, scarred by strafing runs and blackened craters from the Black Hawk's guns. Bodies lay scattered in twisted shapes. Some moved, crawling, dragging, trying to flee. Most didn't. Hayes pulled off the helmet, pressing the cool metal rim against her forehead. She felt sick. She had flown the machine like she promised. She had turned the tide. But the victory reeked of burned flesh and ruptured earth. When she jumped down, the men of Bravo Company were staring at her again. Not with laughter this time, not even with disbelief. Something else. A mix of awe and unease, like she'd just pulled off a magic trick that cost more than anyone wanted to admit. Captain Lawson approached first, boots crunching glass from the blown-out MRAP windows. His face was smeared with soot, his Kevlar dented by shrapnel. "You saved our asses," he said flatly. "But don't think for 1 second you're walking away without explaining how the hell you knew what you were doing." Hayes opened her mouth but shut it again when a medic's cry cut through the haze. "Need hands here. He's crashing." Everyone turned. Corporal Fisher, the man Hayes had dragged out of the wreck, was seizing on a stretcher, his body jerking violently. Medics swarmed, yelling for plasma, pushing morphine. His uniform was soaked crimson from the waist down. Hayes stepped forward before she realized it. The sight twisted her gut into a knot. She had pulled him from the fire, but his life still balanced on a blade's edge. "Is he going to make it?" she asked. The medic didn't look up. "Not unless we get him airlifted. Now." The irony slammed into her chest like another mortar. The only bird that could lift Fisher out was the one she had just risked on an unauthorized gun run. Lawson saw it in her eyes and cursed. "You burned our medevac to play cowboy." "No," Hayes said sharply. "I saved this convoy. If I hadn't." "Tell that to Fisher's family if he bleeds out before we get him to Kandahar." The words hit harder than any explosion. They moved Fisher into the Black Hawk anyway. Hayes helped load the stretcher, her hands sticky with blood, her eyes locked on the pale, gasping soldier. She had never prayed much in her life, but she whispered something under her breath as the rotors spun again. "Stay alive, damn it." The crew chief, dragged back by Lawson to replace Hayes, took controls this time. The bird lifted, carrying Fisher and 2 other wounded skyward, a silhouette shrinking against the burning horizon. The convoy was left in ruins. 1 MRAP totaled, another limping on shredded tires. 7 wounded. 3 dead. And in the middle of it all, Lieutenant Hayes, staring at the sky until the helicopter vanished. Hours later, back at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, the debrief was brutal. Hayes stood stiff before the folding table that passed as Lawson's desk. Maps were pinned across the plywood walls, red pins stabbing like wounds across the region. A single oscillating fan pushed the heat around without mercy. Lawson didn't sit. He paced, voice low but sharp. "You left your assigned role. You commandeered an aircraft. You put an entire convoy at risk without clearance. And you think I should pin you a medal?" Hayes swallowed. Her throat felt scraped raw from the smoke. "With respect, sir, I did what was necessary. The convoy was pinned. Air support was 15 minutes out. We didn't have 15 minutes. You're not a pilot," Lawson shot back. "You had no business in that seat." Hayes met his stare. "Then explain how I brought her back in one piece." Silence stretched. The captain's jaw flexed, but no words came out. Finally he leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "I don't know what kind of past you've been hiding, Lieutenant, but I'll find out. And until I do, you're grounded. No field ops. No exceptions." The order stung worse than she expected. Grounded. Like a child sent to a corner. After everything she'd done, after saving them, this was the thanks. She saluted sharply, spun on her heel and left. Barracks. Night draped the FOB in silence, broken only by distant generators and the occasional rumble of artillery in the hills. Hayes sat on her cot, boots still on, staring at the floor. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time she blinked, she saw Fisher's pale face on the stretcher. Across the room, Cortez leaned against the bunk frame, arms crossed. He hadn't stopped looking at her since they returned. "You going to tell me?" he asked. "Tell you what?" "Don't play dumb. Nobody just hops into a Black Hawk and flies it like that. I've been around pilots my whole damn enlistment. Even the best of them don't make it look that clean." Hayes hesitated. She could lie. She could brush him off. But the truth was clawing inside her chest and she was tired of holding it in. "I was in flight school," she said finally, voice low. "Top of my class. Until I wasn't." Cortez frowned. "Wasn't?" "They pulled me after a simulator crash. Said I froze. Said I wasn't fit to handle combat stress. I never touched the controls again. Until now." Silence hung heavy. Cortez studied her face, like he was weighing whether to believe it. "You froze once," he said finally. "Didn't look like you froze today." Hayes's jaw tightened. "Don't mistake action for fearlessness. I was terrified every second I was up there." Cortez cracked a half smile. "Fear's fine. Means you're smart. Reckless but smart." For the first time all day Hayes almost smiled back. Next morning, the FOB mess hall buzzed with whispers. Hayes felt the eyes on her as soon as she walked in. Soldiers hunched over trays of powdered eggs and coffee packets, murmuring. "That's her," someone said. "The one who stole the Hawk. She saved Bravo's ass. She almost got them all killed." Rumors spread faster than wildfire in the desert. And Hayes knew, every look, every whisper, meant her choices weren't just hers anymore. They were shaping her into something she didn't ask to be, a symbol. A hero to some, a liability to others. When she sat down, Sergeant Reyes slid across from her, his face tight. "You think you're some kind of legend now?" he said. Hayes didn't look up from her tray. "I think I'm trying to eat my breakfast. You put us in the crosshairs. Command finds out you took that bird unauthorized, they'll burn this whole platoon just to set an example. You want that on your conscience." Hayes stabbed a fork into the rubbery eggs. "You'd rather we all died on that road?" Reyes leaned in, voice low. "I'd rather follow orders. Orders keep soldiers alive." Their eyes locked, neither blinking. Around them, the mess hall had gone uncomfortably quiet. Finally, Cortez slid between them, tray in hand. Relax, Reyes. She's not writing her own movie. She did what she had to. Reyes shook his head, muttering, what she had to is going to get us killed. Then he stood and left, boots clanging on the floor. Hayes didn't touch the rest of her food. Command tent. 2 days later, the fallout hit. A major from Battalion HQ flew in, pressed and polished like he'd never sweated in his life. He summoned Hayes to the command tent, where Lawson already waited, arms crossed. The major slid a folder across the table. Lieutenant Hayes. Do you know what this is? Hayes recognized the paperwork instantly. Her file. Training records, evaluations, the black mark that had ended her pilot track. Yes, sir, she said evenly. Then you know what it says. Unfit for cockpit assignment. Demonstrates inability to manage high-stress scenarios. Recommended transfer to intelligence. The major leaned forward. So imagine my surprise when I hear you stole a Black Hawk, flew it into combat, and managed to keep it in the air without incident. Hayes kept her face still. Inside, her pulse was racing. With respect, sir, she said carefully, the record doesn't tell the whole story. People change. People learn. The major studied her, eyes sharp. Or people hide. Which one are you, Lieutenant? She didn't answer. Finally, he closed the folder. You've created a problem. Command wants to court-martial you. But your captain insists you saved his men. So here's what we're going to do. You're staying with Bravo. No flying. No exceptions. But we'll be watching. His tone dropped to a razor's edge. One more stunt and I won't stop the court-martial. The meeting ended. Hayes walked out into the blinding sun, her stomach knotted. That night, sleep didn't come. She lay in her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, every sound amplified, the distant pop of gunfire, the murmur of soldiers playing cards 2 tents over, the cough of the generator. In her head, she replayed the ambush. The explosion. Fisher's blood. The moment she decided to run for the Black Hawk. The way Lawson looked at her when he said don't come back without raining hell. And under it all, the question that wouldn't leave her alone. Had she done the right thing? She had saved lives. But she had also gambled them. And Fisher was still hanging between life and death in Kandahar. Her chest ached with the weight of it. But deeper, under the guilt, under the fear, something else burned. A dangerous, unshakable truth. For the first time since flight school, she had felt alive in that cockpit. Like she was meant to be there. And no order, no file, no major with his neat folders could erase that. The message. 2 days later, the FOB's comms center picked up an intercepted transmission. Taliban chatter, unusually urgent. Hayes translated the phrases by instinct, her pen scratching furiously across the notepad. She froze when she reached the final line. They know about the woman, the message read. The one who flies the American Hawk. Her stomach turned to ice. The enemy knew her name now, even if they didn't know her face. And they weren't laughing either. The desert night was blacker than ink, broken only by the pale glow of the moon and the faint green wash of NVGs. The patrol moved in silence, boots crunching on gravel, rifles ready. Somewhere beyond the ridge, shapes moved that didn't belong, enemy scouts, smugglers, or worse. Every shadow could be death. Lieutenant Emma Hayes adjusted her headset, listening to the hushed comms chatter. She wasn't supposed to be here. After the Black Hawk stunt, Lawson had made it clear. She was grounded, chained to intel duty inside the wire. But she'd pushed back hard. I can't give you reliable assessments if I never see the field, she told him. You want me useful? Let me work. Against his better judgment, Lawson had relented. One patrol. Strictly observational. No risks. But nothing in Afghanistan ever stayed simple. The whispered name. They reached the old village at 0200. Clay huts slumped like tired men, doors hanging open, goats wandering untended. The place was empty, too empty. Hayes's gut clenched. Cortez whispered from the point. Doesn't feel right. It's not, Hayes murmured. Her laptop hummed in her pack, still pulling faint chatter from intercepted frequencies. She'd caught something before they left the FOB, something she hadn't told Lawson yet. The Taliban were whispering her name. Not Hayes. They didn't know that much. But they had a phrase, the woman who flies the hawk. She hadn't decided whether to admit it. Saying it out loud would only confirm the worst fears, that her stunt in the Black Hawk hadn't just saved the convoy, it had painted a target on all their backs. A shout cracked the night. Movement erupted from the huts. Gunfire stitched across the patrol's path, muzzle flashes strobing. Bullets hissed past, snapping into dirt. Contact front. The village exploded into chaos. Bravo company scattered into cover, rifles barking, grenades thumping. The air filled with smoke and the sharp tang of cordite. Hayes dove behind a broken wall, heart hammering. She wasn't supposed to fight. She wasn't supposed to even be here. But she raised her rifle anyway, firing at the figures spilling from the huts. Stay low. Cortez shouted, dragging her further behind cover as rounds chewed the mud brick wall. Across the street, Reyes fired bursts, face grim. It's a setup. They knew we were coming. Hayes's blood ran cold. Of course they knew. Because of her. Fire in the village. The fight stretched into minutes that felt like hours. Bravo pushed house to house, clearing rooms with grenades and muzzle flashes. Hayes moved with them, adrenaline drowning out fear. She wasn't a soldier like the rest, but survival made her one anyway. She kicked through a doorway, weapon raised. Inside she found a boy, maybe 12, clutching an AK that looked too big for his skinny arms. His eyes went wide at the sight of her. Hayes froze. The boy's finger twitched on the trigger. Before she could decide, Reyes stormed in, shoving her aside. The boy dropped the weapon and bolted through a back window, vanishing into the night. Reyes grabbed Hayes's vest, yanking her upright. You freeze again like that and you're dead, he snapped. Hayes's chest burned. He was just a kid. He had a rifle. The truth stung. Hayes bit down on it and kept moving. By the time the gunfire died, the village was a skeleton. Smoke curled from shattered huts. Bodies littered the alleys. Bravo had lost 2 men, both seasoned, both irreplaceable. And when Lawson gathered them for exfil, his eyes found Hayes. You think this was random? He growled. They were waiting for us. Someone tipped them. Hayes said nothing. Her mouth was dry. She knew the truth. This wasn't a coincidence. The Taliban had set the ambush because of her. The confrontation. Back at the FOB, the tension boiled over. Reyes cornered her outside the barracks, his face dark with fury. You're the reason we walked into that trap. Hayes stiffened. You don't know that. I know damn well. They're talking about you, Hayes. Everyone knows it. You painted a bullseye on Bravo's back. Cortez stepped between them, but Reyes wasn't done. He jabbed a finger at her chest. You think this is about proving yourself? About playing pilot? Men are dying because you couldn't follow orders. You should have been shipped out the day you touched that Black Hawk. Hayes's temper snapped. You think I wanted this? You think I asked to be their target? I didn't ask to be here, Reyes. None of us did. But I'm not going to stand back and let men die because I might be inconvenient. The words hung heavy in the air. Cortez's jaw tightened. Reyes finally shoved past them both, muttering curses. Hayes stood trembling, fists clenched. She hated him for being right. The mission. The next day, Lawson dropped the hammer. Command wants us to cut off supply lines running through the Coast Pass, he said in the briefing. His voice was iron. We're taking a Black Hawk team, insertion at 0300, then moving on foot to intercept. Hayes frowned. Black Hawk team. Lawson's eyes flicked to her. You're not flying. Don't even think it. You're on the ground team. Observation only. She nodded stiffly, though her stomach twisted. The thought of sitting inside a Black Hawk and not touching the controls felt unbearable now. But the mission wasn't optional. Into the pass. The Black Hawk thundered through the night sky, its rotors beating against the thin mountain air. Hayes sat strapped in with the others, rifle across her lap, headset crackling. The valley below was a jagged wound in the earth, black as ink. Reyes sat across from her, silent, eyes hard. Cortez gave her a faint grin, like he was trying to remind her they were still alive. The bird flared into the LZ, skids crunching on rocky ground. The squad spilled out, boots clattering, rifles sweeping. The Black Hawk lifted away, a shadow vanishing into the stars. Then there was only silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your skull, made your heartbeat sound like a drum. They moved through the pass, cliffs looming on either side. Hayes scanned her handheld receiver, picking up faint bursts of chatter. Voices in Pashto hurried close. They're here, she whispered. Lawson raised a fist, halting the squad. They crouched, listening. Footsteps. Metal clinks. The scrape of crates on stone. Then the convoy appeared, mules loaded with weapons, fighters escorting them through the pass. Taliban. Lawson's hand went up. Then down. The valley erupted. The ambush reversed. Gunfire shredded the night, echoing off cliffs. Bravo's opening volley cut down the first line of fighters before they even turned. But the rest dove for cover, returning fire in a storm of sparks. Hayes pressed against a boulder, firing bursts, ears ringing. Dust stung her throat. Men shouted, bullets whined. The world was chaos again. Then she heard it. Above the din, faint but clear, the enemy shouted a phrase over and over. The woman. The Hawk woman. Hayes froze. They weren't just fighting Americans tonight. They were hunting her. A burst of rounds chewed the rock beside her head. She ducked, heart pounding. Cortez grabbed her arm, pulling her back. They know you're here, he shouted. Lawson's voice crackled over comms. Hayes, what the hell are they yelling? Her mouth went dry. For a split second she thought about lying, about keeping the truth buried. But the words clawed out anyway. They're talking about me, sir. They know I flew the Black Hawk. The silence on comms was louder than the gunfire. God damn it, Lawson muttered. All right. We finish this fast or we're all dead. Breaking point. The fight dragged on, brutal and close. Hayes fired until her rifle clicked empty, then slammed in another mag with shaking hands. Her shoulder ached from recoil, her lungs burned from dust. A Taliban fighter rushed her position, blade flashing in the dark. Hayes barely had time to raise her rifle. The man slammed into her, knocking her flat. The knife slashed down. And Cortez's rifle barked. The fighter crumpled across her, blood soaking her vest. Hayes shoved the body off, gasping, staring at Cortez. Don't freeze, he growled, hauling her up. Not again. Hayes' stomach churned. She hated that word, freeze. She had trained years to avoid it, to overcome it. But the battlefield didn't care about training. Extraction. By dawn, the pass was littered with bodies. The convoy was destroyed, crates of weapons blown apart. Bravo was bloodied but alive, barely. 2 more wounded, 1 dead. As the extraction Black Hawk swooped in, Hayes slumped against a rock, exhausted, hollow. Her ears still rang with the shouts. The Hawk woman, the Hawk woman. She knew then it wasn't going to stop. The Taliban weren't just fighting Bravo anymore. They were fighting her. And she had no idea how to stop them. Phobie Sentinel. Back at base, Lawson called her into his tent. His face was drawn, eyes bloodshot. He looked older than he had a week ago. You want the truth, Hayes? He said quietly. You scare the hell out of me. Because the enemy knows your name now. And that makes you a liability. Hayes' throat tightened. So what are you saying? Send me home? Bury me in paperwork until this blows over? Lawson shook his head. I don't know yet. But understand this, every decision you make from now on, every step you take, the enemy is watching. And they will use you against us. Hayes stood there, heart pounding as his words sank in. For the first time since landing in Afghanistan, she felt something heavier than fear. She felt hunted. The squad moved at first light, boots dragging across loose shale and dry sand. Their breath puffed white in the cool morning, but sweat already clung beneath their gear. Captain Ramirez set the pace, steady but relentless. Every soldier knew hesitation was death in Ghost Valley. Lieutenant Harper brought up the rear, her rifle sweeping the ridgelines. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the image of the Mi-17 helicopter vanishing into the dusk. If the enemy had air mobility, they weren't just insurgents with old rifles. They were organized, supplied, and planning something bigger. Staff Sergeant O'Malley muttered under his breath as he climbed the slope. Every time I think we've seen the worst, this valley finds a way to dig deeper. Private Daniels groaned from the stretcher carried between 2 soldiers. His fever hadn't broken, and every jolt of the trail made him wince. Klein, the medic, marched close, his jaw clenched, counting Daniel's shallow breaths. 2 more clicks, Harper said quietly, scanning her map. If it's still there, the Soviet outpost should be just over this ridge. Nobody replied. They didn't have the energy. The outpost appeared suddenly, a broken crown of concrete and rusted steel perched on the ridge. Its walls were cracked, rebar exposed like ribs. The red star above the gate was faded but still visible, a relic of an empire long gone. Spooky, Daniels whispered weakly, his voice half delirious. The squad fanned out cautiously. Ramirez raised a fist. Stack up. Breach it clean. 2 soldiers kicked the warped gate. The rusted hinges screamed, and the door swung inward. Rifles led the way, sweeping corners, but no shots came. Inside the outpost was a shell, collapsed roofs, shattered glass, sand piled in drifts. Soviet posters clung to the walls, their slogans faded. Clear, O'Malley called after a tense 5 minutes. They regrouped in the central room where a rusted radio set sat on a desk covered in dust. The wires dangled like dead vines, but the frame of a satellite dish still jutted from the roof. Harper ran her hand across the radio. If we can get power, maybe this still works. Corporal Mitchell dropped his pack with a thud. I've got the portable solar. Might be enough juice. Ramirez nodded. Do it. And double the watch. They'll come looking for us. They spent hours wiring the solar cells into the dead Soviet equipment. Sweat streaked their faces, fingers black with grease. When Mitchell finally flipped the switch, the old radio sputtered with static. The squad froze. Try again, Harper urged. Mitchell adjusted the dials, and through the hiss, a faint voice broke through. English. This is Iron Claw. Repeat, Iron Claw. If any unit reads, respond. Harper leaned close, gripping the mic. Iron Claw, this is Eagle 6. Do you copy? A long pause. Then, Eagle 6? Jesus, we thought you were gone. Where the hell are you? Harper swallowed hard. Ghost Valley. Soviet outpost on grid 27. We've taken contact. One casualty serious. Static, then the voice returned, tight and urgent. Stay put. We'll get QRF to you. But you need to know, the valley's hot. Intel just flagged a weapons convoy moving through in the next 24. Possible manpads. If they get those out, every bird in the sky is at risk. Harper's blood ran cold. She looked at Ramirez, who had been listening. His face was stone. Copy that, Ramirez said into the mic. Send QRF. We'll hold until then. The line cut with a burst of static. The squad sat in silence. Everyone knew what manpads meant, portable surface-to-air missiles. If the insurgents moved them out of Ghost Valley, every helicopter, every supply route, every evac bird would be a target. And they were the only unit in position to stop it. Night fell hard. They lit no fires, speaking only in whispers. Daniels drifted in and out, Klein checking his pulse every hour. The desert wind howled through the ruined windows. O'Malley finally broke the silence. We're not really going to wait, are we? Ramirez said nothing. Harper met O'Malley's gaze. If that convoy moves, the whole region lights up. QRF won't be here in time. It's us or nobody. Mitchell rubbed his temples. So what, we ambush a weapons convoy in the middle of this valley? With half a squad? On fumes? Harper's voice was steady. We don't have to take them all. We just have to stop the missiles from leaving. Ramirez finally spoke, his tone measured. You're saying sabotage? Yes, Harper said. Explosives? Hit them where it hurts. Buy enough time for reinforcements. The squad absorbed the words like a punch to the gut. The decision hung in the stale air, heavy and brutal. Ramirez stood, looking at each soldier in turn. This isn't a democracy. But I'm not sending anyone into this blind. If you've got objections, speak now. No one did. Ramirez nodded once. Then we gear up. They moved out before dawn, leaving Daniels and Klein at the outpost under guard. Harper carried the map, leading them along goat trails high above the valley floor. The moonlight painted the rocks silver. After 3 hours, Mitchell hissed. Lights ahead. They crawled to the edge of the ridge and peered down. The convoy crept along the valley floor, 5 trucks, their headlights dimmed. The lead truck bristled with fighters on the roof, rifles slung across their shoulders. In the middle, under tarps, long crates were strapped down. The shape was unmistakable. Missiles. Harper's pulse quickened. Ramirez whispered, Mitchell, O'Malley, flank left with the charges. Harper, you're with me on overwatch. When the trucks hit that bend, we strike. The soldiers nodded. They split silently, boots muffled by sand. Harper settled behind a rock outcrop, rifle trained on the convoy. She could hear the trucks growling closer, smell the diesel in the wind. Her finger brushed the trigger. Then a shout echoed from below. The convoy braked hard. Fighters spilled out, rifles up. They know, Harper breathed. A flare shot into the sky, bathing the valley in harsh red light. Engage. Ramirez roared. The ridge erupted with gunfire. Harper dropped 2 fighters before they even raised their rifles. Mitchell's charges blew, flipping the rear truck in a fireball. Screams filled the night. The convoy scattered, fighters firing wildly into the cliffs. Tracer rounds carved red arcs in the darkness. Harper stayed calm, picking her shots, but there were too many. They poured from the trucks, disciplined, not panicked. This wasn't just a supply run. This was a military operation. Manpads. O'Malley shouted. One fighter ripped the tarp off a crate, yanking free the tube of a missile launcher. He dropped to one knee, shouldering it. Harper didn't think. She fired. The fighter's chest burst, the launcher clattering to the dirt. But another grabbed it immediately. Shift fire. Take the crates. Ramirez barked. Grenades arced down, exploding among the trucks. Crates splintered, tarps burned, fuel tanks ignited. The valley became chaos, smoke, fire, screaming. Then the Me-17 returned. It roared over the ridge, its side guns lighting up the cliffs. Bullets chewed stone, forcing the squad down. "Fall back," Ramirez yelled. They scrambled along the ridge, sliding down loose gravel as the helicopter's spotlight swept the rocks. Harper's lungs burned, her legs numb, but she kept firing, forcing the Me-17 to pull higher. They reached a ravine and dove in, the chopper's searchlight skimming overhead. Explosions echoed behind them as the convoy burned. The missiles were gone. But the squad was scattered, ammo low, and the enemy helicopter was hunting them. They regrouped hours later in the dark, crouched in a dry creek bed. Their faces were smeared with soot and blood. Mitchell coughed hard, his hand pressed to a graze on his side. "We did it." The crates went up. "No way those missiles survived." "Maybe," Harper said grimly. "But they'll be coming for us now. And that bird isn't leaving the valley until it finds us." Ramirez looked at the exhausted squad. "We hold here until first light, then make for the outpost. If QRF's inbound, that's our only chance." O'Malley spat into the dirt. "And if they don't make it?" Nobody answered. Harper stared up at the night sky, the stars cold and distant. She thought of Daniels, feverish in the outpost, waiting for a rescue that might never come. She thought of the fighters, organized and relentless, with helicopters and missiles. And she thought of the valley itself, silent and watching, as if it had claimed them already. By dawn they were ghosts themselves, low on ammo hunted from the sky, and trapped in a valley that seemed determined to bury them. But Harper knew one thing: if they didn't get out, the war wouldn't stop. The valley was just the beginning. The morning light crawled into Ghost Valley like a reluctant soldier, spilling pale gold across the jagged cliffs. The squad crouched low in the dry creek bed, their faces haggard, eyes ringed with exhaustion. They had fought through the night, burned the enemy convoy, and somehow survived the onslaught of fighters. But the Me-17 still stalked the skies, circling above like a hawk waiting for the kill. Lieutenant Harper sat against a boulder, her rifle resting across her knees. She hadn't closed her eyes once. Every thump of rotor blades made her muscles tighten. Every echo in the cliffs sounded like boots on stone. Private Daniels was still at the Soviet outpost with Klein, fever burning through him. If the helicopter found them before QRF arrived, none of them were leaving alive. Captain Ramirez crouched near Harper, chewing on a piece of dried jerky, though his eyes were far away. "We can't just sit and wait for rescue," he muttered. "That bird will spot us eventually." Harper glanced up at the cliffs. "Then we take it out." O'Malley barked a short laugh. "With what?" "Harsh language." But Harper wasn't smiling. She nodded toward Mitchell's pack. "We've still got demo charges. Enough to rig an ambush." Ramirez frowned. "That's suicide. Setting explosives means predicting their flight path. If we're wrong, we're exposed." Harper met his eyes. "If we're right, we cripple their air cover. The QRF will have a clean approach." Silence. The squad exchanged weary looks, each soldier weighing their odds. Finally, Ramirez nodded. "All right. We do it." They moved quickly, climbing a narrow goat trail that wound toward a rocky plateau overlooking the valley floor. The terrain was brutal, sharp stone cutting their palms, loose gravel sending them sliding backward. Every step drained what little energy they had left. By the time they reached the plateau, the sun was high, baking the rocks. Sweat poured down their faces, soaking their uniforms. Harper scanned the sky. The Me-17 was a dark speck against the blue, circling wide, its shadow gliding across the cliffs. "Patterns predictable," she said, watching it carefully. "They're sweeping in loops, always cutting over the valley floor here. Probably looking for us in the outpost ruins." Mitchell pulled out the charges, his hand steady despite his pale face. "We can wire the ledge. If we time it right, drop half the ridge on them." "Do it," Ramirez ordered. The squad got to work. They jammed explosives deep into cracks in the rock, ran wires, checked triggers. Every move was careful, deliberate. There would be only one shot. As they worked, O'Malley crouched beside Harper. "You ever done this before?" Harper kept her eyes on the charges. "Once. Training exercise. Not with a Russian helicopter gunning for my squad." O'Malley snorted. "Hell of a first time." By mid-afternoon, the trap was ready. They pulled back into cover, lying flat against the hot stone. Mitchell clutched the detonator like a holy relic. The Me-17 roared closer, its rotors thumping hard, dust swirling in its wake. Fighters leaned out the doors, scanning the cliffs with rifles. "Wait for it," Ramirez whispered. The helicopter dipped lower, following the same wide arc Harper had predicted. The shadow stretched across the valley floor, then rose toward the plateau. Closer, closer. Harper held her breath. Now! Ramirez snapped. Mitchell slammed the detonator. The ridge exploded with thunder, a roar that shook the earth. Boulders and debris tore free, cascading down in a wave of destruction. The Mi-17 jerked sideways, the pilot trying to pull up, but too late. A massive slab of rock smashed into the tail rotor. The helicopter spun violently, rotors shearing into stone. Screams erupted from inside as the bird cartwheeled, slammed into the cliff, and exploded in a fireball. The shockwave hit them like a punch, heat and dust engulfing the plateau. The squad threw their arms over their heads as flaming debris rained down. When the roar finally faded, only black smoke remained, curling upward from the shattered wreck. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then O'Malley let out a ragged laugh. Well, damn. We killed the Hawk. Cheers broke out, rough and desperate. But Harper didn't smile. She kept her eyes on the smoke. They know we're here now. Every fighter in the valley will be coming. They pulled back from the plateau, moving fast. Every soldier was running on fumes, but adrenaline carried them. The radio at the outpost had to work. The QRF had to be inbound. By the time they reached the ruined Soviet walls again, dusk was falling. Daniels was alive, but barely. His skin was pale, lips cracked, sweat soaking his shirt. Klein shook his head. He needs evac yesterday. Then we hold until evac arrives, Ramirez said grimly. He looked at his soldiers. Set perimeter. Dig in. They moved like ghosts, silent and efficient. Sandbags were piled, firing positions marked. Every rifle was checked, every grenade counted. Harper climbed to the roof of the outpost, scanning the horizon through binoculars. Dust clouds rose in the distance, vehicles, lots of them. Her stomach clenched. They're coming. The first shots came just after nightfall. Tracers streaked across the dark, red and green lines carving the sky. Bullets hammered the walls, sparks flying. Contact east. O'Malley roared. The squad answered with a wall of fire, rifles barking, machine gun rattling. Shadows darted in the darkness, fighters surging forward in waves. Grenades thumped, explosions rocking the outpost. Stone shattered, dust filled the air. The squad fired until their barrels smoked, every shot a prayer. Harper's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and steady. Hold the line. Short, controlled bursts. They fought like cornered wolves, every soldier knowing this could be their last stand. Blood slicked the ground, ears rang from constant blasts, but they held. Then a new sound cut through the night, the distant chop of helicopter rotors. Birds inbound. Ramirez shouted. But Harper's gut twisted. Was it friendly, or another enemy bird? She strained her ears, heart racing. The sound grew louder, closer. Then flares streaked down, bathing the valley in brilliant white light. Over the cliffs swooped two Black Hawks, their miniguns spitting fire. The enemy fighters scattered, cut down in streams of glowing tracers. The squad roared in relief. This is Falcon 2-1, a voice crackled over the comms. Hold tight, Eagle 6. We're bringing you home. Evac was chaos. The Black Hawks hovered low, rotors blasting sandstorms across the outpost. The squad hauled Daniels onto a stretcher, rushing him to the bird. Klein clambered in after him, shouting vitals to the medic on board. Bullets still snapped overhead, but the Black Hawks laid down, suppressing fire, clearing the landing zone. Ramirez waved his squad forward. Move. Move. One by one they scrambled aboard, gripping straps, ducking under the rotors. Harper was last. She turned back once, staring at the smoking valley. She thought of the old man in the village, the fighters, the missiles. Ghost Valley wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Then O'Malley grabbed her arm. Lieutenant, let's go. She jumped aboard and the Black Hawk lifted into the night. The valley shrank below them, burning with fire and smoke. The squad sat slumped in their seats, exhausted, bloodied, but alive. Daniels groaned softly on the stretcher, his hand twitching. Harper reached over, gripping it tight. For the first time in days she allowed herself to breathe. But as the Black Hawk banked toward base, she stared out the window at the darkness below. Ghost Valley still pulsed with unseen movement, and she knew this was only the beginning. The enemy was organized. They had Russian helicopters, missiles, supply lines. Something larger was at work. And sooner or later she would have to come back. The desert had been quiet for days, too quiet as every soldier in the 101st knew. Captain Ramirez sat in the command tent, hunched over a map spread across a folding table, while his staff whispered updates about local chatter, intercepted radio calls, and the half-hearted reports from nervous locals. He didn't trust any of it. Silence wasn't peace. Silence meant the enemy was breathing in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Outside the air was cool but tense. Soldiers sharpened their blades, cleaned their rifles, and whispered half-jokes to each other, the kind meant to mask fear. The camp generator hummed low, flooding the forward operating base in yellow light. At the flight line, the Black Hawk sat in eerie stillness, blades tied down, its paint scarred from weeks of missions. And there she was, Lieutenant Kara Morgan, the pilot who had silenced every doubter by bringing that bird down in one piece when no one thought she could. She was sitting cross-legged under its tail boom, checking over the hydraulic lines with a flashlight. She hummed softly to herself. Nobody could make out what song it was, but it carried across the night like defiance. Sergeant Tex Henderson dropped into the dirt beside her. "Ma'am, you always treat this thing like it's your child." Kara smirked. "She is my child. And if I don't check every bolt, one of you knuckleheads dies in midair. Not on my watch." Tex grinned, spitting into the dirt. "Fair enough, but you should be inside. The CO's calling for everybody to stay sharp tonight. Smells like trouble." Kara's expression hardened. She clicked the flashlight off and stared at the desert horizon. "Yeah, I feel it too." The first hit. At 0200 hours, the night exploded. It started with a dull thud in the distance, then a scream across the base radio. "Incoming. Rockets incoming from the east. All units take cover." The first salvo slammed into the outer barriers. Sandbags erupted. A tent burst into flame. Sirens wailed as soldiers scrambled for cover, helmets half-fastened, rifles clutched tight. Mortar shells rained down, shaking the desert floor. The air filled with choking dust, metal fragments, and the gut-punch sound of men screaming for medics. Captain Ramirez stormed out of the command tent, barking orders. "Get those birds ready. I want eyes in the sky now. Suppression fire on that ridge." Kara was already sprinting toward the Black Hawk, helmet under one arm. Tex and Corporal Dawson were right behind her, hauling ammo crates. "Ma'am?" Dawson shouted over the chaos. "We've got half the base on fire and they're hitting the ammo dump." "Then we put this thing in the air before they take us all down with it," Kara snapped. "Scramble to fly." Bullets cracked through the night as insurgents closed in, spraying the base with machine gun fire. Soldiers manned the perimeter, their rifles spitting back in desperate rhythm. Kara leapt into the Black Hawk's cockpit, flipping switches with rapid precision. The dash lit up green, rotors groaning awake. She felt her heart hammer against her chest. Tex climbed in beside her, headset crackling. "You sure we can lift in this storm, LT? Half the base is on fire." She shot him a glare. "Tex, if we don't lift, the whole base is gone in 30 minutes. Strap in." The Black Hawk roared to life, dust and flames swirling in its wake. Mechanics dove out of the way, shielding their faces as the rotor wash blasted through the smoke. Captain Ramirez's voice cut in over comms. "Morgan, I need you airborne now. Suppress enemy fire on grid 34. They've got RPG teams on the ridge. If they take out the fuel depot, we're done." Kara gritted her teeth. "Copy that." Lifting off. The Black Hawk clawed into the smoky night. Death from above. The ridge was alive with muzzle flashes. Insurgents poured fire into the base from dug-in positions, their silhouettes lit by the glow of their own mortars. Kara pushed the stick forward, roaring low across the desert floor. Tex leaned out the side door, laying down suppressive fire with the M240. Brass rained out, the gun rattling in his hands as tracers stitched the ridge. "RPG team at 2 o'clock. Dawson yelled from the other side. A missile streaked up at them. "Hold on." Kara yanked the Black Hawk sideways. The rocket screamed past the tail, missing by a breath, exploding in a blinding flash. Tex cursed. "They're getting smart. These bastards are trained." Kara's voice was ice. "Then we outfly them." She nosed the helicopter straight into the chaos, skimming just above the ridge. Dawson's gun barked. Tex lit up another position. Explosions tore through the enemy dugouts as Kara's co-pilot armed the rockets. She whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. "For every friend they took from us, this one's for you." The Black Hawk unleashed its fury. Rockets screamed into the ridge, blasting enemy teams into fire and dust. The earth shook. The insurgents broke, scattering like insects. A new threat. But victory never came easy. "Command, this is Morgan, we've neutralized the ridge. Send ground teams to mop up." Ramirez's voice came back, tight with urgency. Negative, Morgan. New intel just hit. That was only the opening wave. They've got technicals moving in from the south, heavily armed. If they breach the wire, we're looking at a massacre. Kara's stomach twisted. She banked hard south, scanning the horizon. Headlights. Dust trails. A convoy of trucks with mounted heavy machine guns, barreling straight for the base. Tex's voice shook. That's at least 20 of them. 20 too many, Kara said. The Black Hawk dove. Bullets lanced the night sky as the convoy opened fire. Kara weaved through the storm, rotors whining. The first pass tore up 2 trucks, Tex's fire chewing through windshields, grenades blasting engines apart. But the others kept coming. On the second run, an RPG struck. It clipped the Black Hawk's tail, spinning the bird into a violent lurch. Warning alarms screamed through the cockpit. Kara fought the controls, sweat pouring down her face. Stay with me, baby, stay with me. The helicopter bucked, but she leveled it out, barely keeping altitude. Tex's face was pale. LT, she's hurt bad. We can't keep this up. Kara's jaw clenched. Then we finish it now. Fire in the camp. On the ground, the base was chaos. Insurgents had breached the outer perimeter, using the distraction to push in. Gunfire roared in every direction. Medics dragged the wounded into cover, explosions ripped through fuel barrels, and soldiers fought in the smoke, bayonets and fists when their mags ran dry. Captain Ramirez stood at the center, rifle in hand, directing squads like a conductor in a storm. His face was streaked with dust and blood, but his eyes burned with fire. Hold the line. Nobody gives an inch. Kara's still up there buying us time, make it count. The Black Hawk's last stand. The convoy was nearly on top of the base. Kara brought the Black Hawk around one last time, alarms blaring, hydraulics failing. She pushed it into a screaming dive, skimming so low the rotor wash kicked up waves of sand. Tex and Dawson fired until their barrels glowed red. Trucks erupted in fireballs, bodies flung into the desert night. Kara fired the last of her rockets, obliterating the lead technical in a thunderous blast. But the return fire shredded them. Bullets punched through the fuselage. Dawson cried out, collapsing in his harness, blood soaking his vest. Dawson's hit. Tex roared. Kara didn't hesitate. She slammed the bird sideways, bringing the Black Hawk down directly in front of the convoy. Dust exploded around them as the helicopter skidded across the sand, blades still chopping the air. Tex stared at her in disbelief. Are you crazy? Her eyes were locked, fierce. If they want through, they'll have to go through me. The convoy swerved, momentarily stunned by the wall of steel and fire blocking their path. That hesitation was all the base needed. Mortars thundered from inside the wire, slamming into the trucks. Soldiers surged forward with machine guns blazing, shredding the enemy. One by one, the technicals exploded into infernos. The assault broke. Survivors fled into the desert, vanishing into the smoke. Aftermath. The battle was over by dawn. The base smoldered, littered with wreckage and silence broken only by the cries of medics working the wounded. Smoke curled into the morning sky. Bodies, friend and foe, lay across the desert floor. Kara sat slumped in the cockpit, her helmet in her lap. Blood streaked her arm, but she ignored it, staring blankly ahead. Dawson had been pulled from the bird, clinging to life. Tex leaned against the doorframe, his usual grin gone. Captain Ramirez approached, his uniform torn, his face drawn. He looked at the Black Hawk, half destroyed, riddled with bullet holes, one rotor bent at a grotesque angle. Then he looked at Kara. You did it, he said softly. You stopped them. Kara's lips trembled. For the first time since she'd landed that bird weeks ago, she looked fragile. At what cost, sir? Ramirez didn't answer. You didn't have to. The mystery. That night, as the base buried their dead under the desert stars, Ramirez gathered his officers in the command tent. He spread out a new map marked with fresh intel. We just survived the worst assault this sector has seen in months, he said. But intel suggests this wasn't random. They were testing us. Probing. He tapped the map with grim finality. And if our sources are right, this was only the beginning. Kara stood in the doorway, bandaged and silent, staring at the red circle drawn on the map. A target deeper in the desert. Her eyes narrowed. Something about the way the attack had unfolded didn't feel like coincidence. It felt orchestrated. The desert was holding secrets. And they weren't done yet. The desert at dawn looked like it had been scarred by the gods themselves. Smoke still rose from the smoldering wrecks of enemy trucks. The forward operating base was quiet, not in peace but in exhaustion. Soldiers walked like ghosts, their uniforms torn, faces blackened by smoke and grief. The medics worked in silence now, bandaging wounds that no longer bled as much as they had hours ago. Lieutenant Kara Morgan stood outside the wreck of her Black Hawk, running a hand along its shredded fuselage. The helicopter looked less like a machine and more like a fallen beast, a warrior that had given everything in the fight. "You did good," she whispered to it. "Better than anyone had the right to expect." Behind her, Sergeant Tex Henderson limped up, arm in a sling, face pale but still stubbornly carrying that half grin. "You talk to that bird more than you talk to people, LT," he said. Kara smirked faintly, though her eyes stayed on the wreck. "That bird kept us alive. Can't say the same for everyone else." The silence between them was heavy. Too many names missing from the morning roll call. Too many friends zipped into black bags. The funeral fire. That afternoon, the company gathered outside the wire. The desert wind whipped at the flags draped over crude wooden coffins. Chaplain Harris, voice cracked from smoke and grief, read words of honor over the fallen. Captain Ramirez stood front and center, jaw tight, hands behind his back, his uniform singed but pressed. He had seen death before, but every time it cut the same. When the final prayer was spoken, the rifles barked in salute. Shell casings clinked against the sand. A bugle wailed through the silence. Kara's eyes burned, but no tears fell. She wouldn't give the desert that. Not here. Not in front of them. Tex, though, muttered under his breath, "Hell of a way to remember them. Wish we'd buried the bastards who caused it right alongside." Kara turned her head, eyes narrowing. "We might still." The briefing. That night, Ramirez called the officers into the command tent. A fresh map lay across the table, marked with red circles. His face was harder than usual, eyes cold from sleeplessness. "We've intercepted communications," he said, pointing at the largest circle. "The assault we fought last night wasn't a standalone strike. It was a probing action designed to gauge our strength. Their main force is massing here in the canyon at Khazar al-Murad. If we sit and wait, they'll roll through this whole sector in a week." Murmurs spread. Some officers shifted uneasily. Kara stepped forward. "So we hit them first." Ramirez looked at her. "Exactly." The room went quiet. The thought of charging headfirst into the stronghold of the same insurgents who had nearly overrun them wasn't exactly comforting. Kara's voice cut through. "They think we're broken after last night. That's when we hit hardest. Surprise them." Tex, leaning against the tent pole, muttered, "That's suicide." Kara shot him a look. "So is sitting here waiting for the next wave. A hard decision." Later, Kara sat alone by the fire, staring at the stars. She thought about Dawson, still in the medical tent, fighting for his life. She thought about the men they buried that afternoon. She thought about flying again. Her Black Hawk was down, but another helicopter waited. It wasn't hers. It belonged to another crew, grounded after the pilot was killed last week. The idea of stepping into another bird's seat felt wrong. Almost like betrayal. But she knew she didn't have a choice. Ramirez appeared beside her, silent at first. Finally he spoke. "You've got that look." "What look?" she asked. "The one that says you've already decided, even if you hate it." Kara exhaled slowly. "We go into that canyon, sir, a lot of us won't come back." Ramirez's jaw tightened. "War isn't about who comes back, Morgan. It's about who makes it possible for others to." She looked at him, then really looked. For a moment she saw not the hard-edged captain, but the man carrying the weight of every decision, every life lost under his command. "I'll fly," she said quietly. Into the canyon. The mission launched before dawn. 2 Black Hawks, 1 Apache gunship, and a convoy of armored Humvees rolled out into the desert. The air was tense, the soldiers inside checking and rechecking weapons, their eyes hard but quiet. Kara sat in the pilot's seat of the borrowed Black Hawk. The machine didn't feel like hers, controls slightly stiffer, gauges in different places, but she forced herself to meld with it. Tex rode shotgun, headset crackling. "If this bird doesn't like you, LT, I'm jumping out." She smirked. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes on the ground." "Fair," Tex said, chambering around. The canyon loomed ahead, jagged rock walls rising on both sides. The convoy rolled in, dust rising in the morning light. Everything was too still. Too quiet. Ramirez's voice came over comms. "All units, stay sharp. We're walking into the lion's den." The ambush. The first explosion hit the lead Humvee. A fireball ripped through the canyon, flipping the vehicle onto its side. Shrapnel shredded the soldiers walking nearby. Then the cliffs lit up with muzzle flashes. Dozens of insurgents, hidden in the rocks, unleashed hell. Bullets poured down like rain. Ambush. Ambush. Return fire. The canyon erupted into chaos. Humvees roared forward, machine guns blazing. Soldiers scrambled for cover, firing upward. The Apache unleashed rockets into the cliffs, blasting chunks of stone into the air. Kara dove low, flying straight into the storm. Tracers ripped past the windshield. Tex returned fire from the door, cutting down enemy fighters as they tried to reload RPGs. Rockets at 3 o'clock. Tex shouted. Kara jerked the Black Hawk sideways. The missile screamed past, exploding against the canyon wall. She grit her teeth. Not today. A desperate push. The convoy was pinned. The canyon walls gave the insurgents the advantage, and every second meant more American lives lost. Kara's voice crackled over comms. Ramirez, we can't sit here. I'm pushing through to clear the far end. Cover me. Ramirez barked back. That's suicide, Lieutenant. Better me than all of us, Kara snapped. She pushed the Black Hawk forward, guns blazing. Tex laid down heavy fire, cutting a path through the enemy. RPG streaked past. One clipped the tail, shaking the helicopter violently. Kara fought the controls with everything she had. Her vision blurred from the strain. Stay with me, baby, just a little longer. Bullets punched through the cabin. Tex cursed, blood spraying across his sleeve. I'm good. I'm good. Keep flying, he roared, firing through the pain. The Black Hawk roared through the canyon, rockets firing into nests of insurgents, shredding their cover. Explosions lit up the cliffs, raining stone and dust. Behind her, the convoy surged forward, soldiers rallying behind the chaos she carved. The cost. By the time they broke free of the canyon, the Apache was trailing smoke. One Humvee lay burning in the dust, and dozens of soldiers were wounded or dead. But they had done it. The insurgent stronghold had been shattered, their ambush broken. Survivors fled deeper into the desert, abandoning weapons and vehicles. The Black Hawk limped out, alarms screaming, hydraulics leaking. Kara fought the stick, forcing it down into a rough landing on open desert ground. Tex stumbled out, bloodied but alive, leaning on his rifle. He looked back at the helicopter, its engine sputtering, its frame riddled with holes. He grinned weakly. Guess this one's yours now too, LT. Kara sat in the cockpit for a moment, breathing hard. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. Instead, she just laid her forehead against the stick and whispered, "Thank you." The silence after. Back at base, the survivors were hailed as heroes. But the victory felt hollow. Too many empty bunks. Too many names to add to the wall. Ramirez stood with Kara at sunset, overlooking the desert. His voice was quiet. We bloodied them today. But intel says there's someone new pulling the strings. Someone who planned that ambush. This war isn't done. Not by a long shot. Kara said nothing. She just stared at the horizon, where the sun sank into blood-red sand. Tex limped up beside them, holding 2 dog tags he'd taken from Dawson's bed. He didn't make it, Tex said softly. But he told me before he went under, to tell you thanks. Said he never doubted you, LT. Kara closed her eyes, swallowing hard. The shadow. That night, Kara sat alone by the wreck of the Black Hawk. The desert wind was cold, carrying the whispers of everything they had lost. She ran her fingers over the bullet holes, her reflection fractured in the broken glass. Somewhere out there she knew the enemy was watching. Waiting. Planning their next move. She whispered to the night, to the desert itself. You think I'm done? You think you can break us? No. I'll fly again. And when I do... Her eyes hardened. I'll be coming for you. The end.